decided that I wanted to talk about one of the things that Banks and Banks brought up, which was a feminist pedagogy. It's something that I'm familiar with, and the Banks and Banks description of it does continue to support my idea or my understanding of female pedagogy. The idea that all subjects need to have more female input as well as female focused um, articles, heroines, I guess to say, depending on the subject matter. And so, one of the things, at least that resonated with me this week in my own teaching practice, is the choosing of curriculum. Now, typically, an elementary school teacher doesn't have a lot of choice when it comes to curriculum. We kind of have to do what we're told. However, I have a little bit of leeway when it comes to my English language enrichment class, ELE. Since they are either English only or FEPT, fluent English speakers, pretty much anything I bring in can be considered enriching the language. So while we're enriching the language, we also work on reading text for comprehension. We work on note-taking skills, marking up the text, writing in the margins, as well as writing to multiple sources. So I often will choose articles from Avid Weekly. Avid is an achievement program that our school is currently implementing, and it goes with your current curriculum. So Avid Weekly is a set of articles that they also have set up lessons for. So new ones come out every month, and a few weeks ago I chose one that was about a former refugee who was looking for a man who had given her a bike when she was very young. Now, originally I had chosen this article because I wanted to introduce my students to what a refugee was. It's something that is fairly topical and can create a lot of emotions, especially if they're not familiar with it beforehand. So this was a nice way of introducing the idea without getting political or having to actually have any beliefs on whether we should allow refugees or not, because for the most part, the United States wasn't involved. So I realized that this particular article actually did have more personal insight, which I now know is a female way, or traditionally feminine way of a learning style, of learning things with stories in context, as opposed to separated and simply just saying like a refugee is getting more of a personal story with it. So after we read the story, we dug into it a little bit. I decided to pair it with another story to write to two sources. And this time I made the conscious decision to find another article with a female subject as its focus. And I was able to find one in an older Scholastic News, which I've collected for a few years. And so we were able to discuss both articles, and with a lot of input, we were able to connect the two articles that both were refugees, both were women, girls, but they also had something, either a thing or a person, that helped them through this tough time. So we were then able to sort of connect with ourselves, that we also had our own moment or person who could help us get through tough times. So we were able to talk with these articles. We were able to go over the differences of other countries. One of them focused on a woman. The woman was originally from Iraq, and the other article, forgive my pronunciation, from the country of Eritrea. So we were able to go over the differences in their countries. We were also able to talk about how difficult it would be to leave your home, and sort of what kind of circumstances would be required for you to make such a decision. So in one case for Iraq, we were talking about war, and in the case of Eritrea, we went over what religious persecution was. So a lot of tough subjects that we could kind of deal with um, from a more objective standpoint, which is traditionally a male way of gathering information. But that way, we weren't trying to make it too political or too personal. They are fifth graders. I don't want to give them too much at a time. Um, and so we were then able, and we're still working on the response now of how we all have moments that could help us get through tough times, and that way their readers could connect to the articles that we've read. So for me, the original choice was my original article choice was a bit multicultural. I did want to bring this other way of living into my students' perspective, to give them eventually, hopefully down the line, more empathy towards other people, more understanding. But I then did make the deliberate choice to include more of a female perspective in a more social, emotional subject. So it wasn't directly a lesson on gendered views or how different genders are treated. It was a little bit more subtle, but I am consciously trying to bring in more female role models, female perspectives to every subject, and this was just the one I worked on this week. I will put a link to those two articles should anyone else be interested in. So somewhere between a fifth and maybe eighth grade reading level. I will say that the Avid articles are a little more advanced. And for those of you who teach middle school, the article that dealt with the bike, the gift, she found him through Twitter, so there's a little bit of a internet connection. I did have to explain to my students what a retweet was, so little not quite there yet, but for those of you who teach middle school, it might be a decent resource. All right, so I'll see you online.